I was always pretty good at learning stuff, acing some of the toughest exams within just a few weeks of study, picking up new languages in less than a year, and learning new skills way faster than most people. All because I learned how to learn at a very young age. Unfortunately, this wasn't something that was taught in school, because school focused on passing on knowledge rather than learning techniques. So if you want to rapidly master new skills to transform your life without wasting time, these 10 evidence-based tips are exactly what you need. Tip number 1 is to label yourself before you learn. Even if you have the perfect speech, rehearse your lines thousands of times, and have all the knowledge around public speaking, if you don't believe you can deliver a speech in front of a crowd, you'll still be pretty nervous when you step onto that stage. When I switched from being an engineer to a management consultant, I didn't wait until I was good at consulting. The moment I stepped into that job, I introduced myself as a strategy consultant who was working on XYZ project for a Fortune 500 company. Was it true? Sort of. In all honesty, I was just a very small part of the whole project. But I act like I own that whole thing. The key is to self-identify as someone who's good at the thing you're trying to learn. Put on a label on yourself before you even start learning. If you look back on the very first YouTube video that I made, that absolutely sucked. But right after I finished that first upload, I start to identify myself as a YouTuber. I start to talk to everyone about content economy, side hustle, and all that. I own that label as a YouTuber. And that label gave me the confidence to keep publishing more videos like this. So start from day 1, start to build that confidence and wear that label proudly. And tip number 2 is to seeing the bigger picture. Take learning math as an example. Most people dive straight into the basics like remembering formulas or abstract concepts. That in fact is highly ineffective. In the book A Mind for Numbers, Barbara Oakley shares how she struggled with math for years until she realized that memorizing formulas wasn't enough. She found that drawing diagrams and mind maps are the best way to see how concepts fit together into a bigger structure of knowledge. Many years later, Barbara went on to become a professor of engineering at Oakland and McMaster University, where she produced some of the most popular courses the world has ever seen. So essentially, when we first see the big picture and understand the connection between ideas, we avoid overloading our working memory and produce more effective learnings. This is called John Sweller's cognitive load theory, and this is the reason why mind mapping and visualization work so well. They organize information in a way that makes it easier to process and remember. Let me give you an example. If you want to learn Mandarin Chinese, don't start by memorizing complex characters right away. Start by mapping out the whole language system, how characters are built, how tones change meaning, and how sentence structure differs from English. This way, when you encounter difficult concepts or challenges in the future, you'll know which subset of knowledge you need to research more. And learning will soon feel like building a solid ground. And tip number 3 is to teach what you're trying to learn as soon as you can. We often have this thing like, I'm not allowed to teach this until I really become an expert at it. But this is far from the truth. And there are 2 reasons why that's the case. Reason number 1 is teaching is by far the most effective method for memorizing anything. There's this widely known concept of the learning pyramid, where based off a study by the National Training Laboratory since the 60s, the pyramid shows that you retain 90% of what you learn by teaching it to someone else. That's far higher than just reading 10%, listening to a lecture 5%, or watching a demonstration 30%. When you teach someone, you're forced to break down complex ideas into simpler terms and clarify the knowledge in your own mind. It's not about having all the answers. It's not even about helping other people. It's about having the opportunity to communicate your current understanding in a way that is digestible. The second reason is teaching someone else actually help you build a learning community around you very quickly. If you have ever write up a Reddit post trying to solve someone else's problem, you will know right after you finish that post, your own understanding of that subject matter suddenly becomes heightened. People also join in discussion and raise questions, all of which leads to a pretty fantastic learning experience. So don't wait until you are an expert. As soon as you learn something new, find a way to teach it, whether it's to make a perfect steak or how to play the piano. Even if you feel insecure about your knowledge, once you can articulate your understanding clearly, you know that learning has a permanent place in your brain. Tip number 4 is to actively recall with gamification. We've all been there. You study hard, feel confident, but 2 days later, when it's time to recall the information, your mind is blank like an old computer opening up 50 browsers at the same time. I mean, you study very hard about this, right? Why can't you remember any of it? Well, 9 times out of 10, you don't remember what you learned because you don't do enough active recall. The idea behind active recall is very simple. We don't learn by just cramming stuff into our brain. We learn by knowledge output. or testing yourself on that knowledge. Now, when we say testing, we often think of like schooling or report card, but when it comes to learning in general in everyday life, it should be a lot less serious than that. Who wants to sit there and quiz themselves all day? This is where gamification comes in. You need to find a way to find learning fun. That's why I'm a huge fan of apps like Duolingo, which I currently have a 200-day streak on the app. I consistently spend 30 minutes learning a new language, and it actually feels fun and engaging. I'm sometimes becomes quite competitive about my learning streak amongst my friends and get a little nervous if I miss a day. And here's the science part that backs this up. A study by Rodiger and Butler in 2011 found that students who used active recall and tested themselves regularly retained information much better than those who simply reviewed notes. The student who turned their study sessions into a game by rewarding themselves or competing with friends scored even higher than those who just did the regular test. Gamification makes the learning process way less like a grind and more like a fun challenge, which of course keep your motivation high throughout your learning journey. And tip number 5 is to replace your distractions. We all know the classic advice: eliminate distraction when you study, turn off the notifications, clean your desk, lock your phone into a lunchbox, and toss it into a quiet room. They all sound great until life happens. Instead of obsessing over a perfectly distraction-free space, there's a better way: change your environment. Studies show that learning in different environments actually improves memory retention because your brain starts associating knowledge with multiple contexts. So instead of forcing focus in one spot, spread your learning materials around. Post-it notes on the bathroom mirror, vocabulary flashcards on the fridge, or physics formula on the kitchen cabinet. And while you're in a different focused environment, you can also hijack your bad habits. New environment also means you are less likely to trigger your old habits. So every time you feel the urge to grab your phone for no reason, make a deal with yourself. Do 5 minutes of learning first. Once you start, chances are you're just going to keep on going. It's a simple way to trick your brain into building momentum. Before you know it, you're actually being productive instead of doom scrolling the cat videos. Tip number 6 is to learn like you're already using it. We don't learn just to know things, we learn to use them. That's why understanding beats memorization every single time. Take learning Chinese, for example. You can memorize thousands of words of grammar rules, but the first time you try to have a real conversation, your brain will probably short circuits. The key is to make your learning as immersive as possible. Study shows that engaging multiple senses like speaking, writing, listening, even moving helps reinforce learning. The more senses you activate, the stronger the neural connection becomes. That's why people who move to a new country often pick up language faster than those who study in the classroom. But what if you can't physically move to a new country? Well, take myself as an example. I only started to learn English when I was 17 years old, which is quite old for a lot of people. And I did it by playing World of Warcraft, which wasn't available back then in my mother language, which is Mandarin Chinese. So little did I knew, I accidentally stumbled upon the best language learning tool, which is online video games. To play that game, I had to read, type, and speak English in order to solve puzzles, search for answers, and talk to people in English. Fast forward a year after hopelessly addicted to World of Warcraft, I had also accidentally become quite fluent in English. That was the power of immersion. The goal is to simulate the environment where you actually be using that skill. Because when the moment comes, you want your brain to say, oh yeah, I've done that before. I've done that 1,000 times. So stop learning like a student. Start learning like a practitioner. That is how you master anything. Tip number 7 is to fine-tune your desirable difficulties. If you're trying to master something that's really challenging, something that takes months or even years, then this next tip is crucial to you. Constantly fine-tune your level of difficulty. Think about learning to dunk a basketball. A regular hoop is 10 feet tall, way too tall for a beginner to practice effectively, right? But how about using a toddler's mini hoop? Sure, you can dunk all day, but you can't actually get any better. So the real solution is to adjust the hoop to just the right height, where it's challenging but also doable. Train your dunking technique on slightly lower rim while building your leg strength, then gradually raise the hoop as you improve. That adjustable hoop is what we call the desirable difficulty. It's a sweet spot where learning is hard enough to challenge you, but not so hard that you will give up. If it's too easy, you're just going through this motion. It's meaningless, right? If it's too hard, then you are burnt out before making any progress. In fact, that actually applies to everything you learn. Making it slightly harder than your comfort level. That's where the real growth happens. Tip number 8 is to ride the forgetting curve. Even if you do everything we talked about so far, you're still going to forget things over time. That is just how the brain works. In the 1800s, a researcher named Ebbinghaus discovered something called a forgetting curve, a graph that shows how quickly we forget new information. Turns out our brains are like storage boxes. The stuff we use often stays at the top, easy to grab. But the things we don't use, they sink to the bottom, collecting dust until they eventually disappear. So key insight here is that we forget new things fast. But if we review information at the right interval, today, tomorrow, next week, as long as we review things regularly, we can slow down the forgetting process. This is called spaced repetition, and it works like a muscle memory of your brain. The more you reinforce this knowledge over time, the more permanent it becomes. So if you don't want your hard-earned knowledge to vanish into the void, don't just learn it once. Schedule your learning, space your review sessions, and make sure your hard-earned skill stay in your head for as long as possible. But learning isn't just about picking up one skill and stopping there. Over time, what if you want to master more skills? Expand your knowledge and apply what you learn to different areas of your life. To do that, you need to understand one but very powerful thing. So I'm going to make another video game reference, which is every skill is just one node in your skill tree. So if you ever play a video game, some players focus on depth, leveling up one skill to mastery, others focus on breadth. The real magic happens when you do both. You go deep enough to be great at something, but also wide enough to integrate that knowledge with other fields. The last two tips will show you how to turn a single skill into lifelong expertise. Which brings us to tip number 9, make your skill tree deeper. There is this concept in the learning world called overlearning. When we're learning something, we actually want to learn it in more depth than we necessarily need to. Most people stop learning once they understand what something is. But if you want to truly master a skill, oftentimes it's a good idea to go deeper. You want to understand why it works the way it does, questioning those assumptions around it, and uncover deeper connections. For example, when I first started working as a management consultant, the best advice my mentor gave me was to always ask the question, so what? To give you a hypothetical scenario, if I were to analyze a client's revenue and discover that it has been growing for the 3 consecutive quarters, so what? Maybe I'll go around and find out, oh, it turns out their biggest competitor has been struggling. And so what? And oh, actually, the entire industry has been declining, and this revenue spike is just a short-term effect of the competitor's exit. Is that all? So what? Client actually needs to rethink their long-term strategy in this market instead of celebrating the short-term success. So this habit of digging deeper applies to everything. Let's say you are learning Chinese, you memorize a new character. Great, but why it is written that way? Part of this character, which is called a radical, what does it mean? Oh, I see, this means wood. So any character with this wood radical means wood related. And this means bridge, and this means forest, and this means building. Now, instead of understanding just one character, you dig deeper and understanding a bunch of characters. Or at least you can sort of guess what it means. If you push yourself, always ask why and so what. You uncover deeper layers of the knowledge. And the deeper your understanding is, the easier it becomes to learn anything else in the field. Because when you know why things work, you don't just memorize fact, you also start to see how everything connected. This brings us to our final tips on how to learn. Stop training skills in isolations. There's this concept called interleaved practice, which is a method where you mix different but related skills instead of practicing one at a time. If you look at one's basketball training, you rarely see people just shoot jump shots for 2 hours straight. They practice a range of motion involve catch and shoot, step back, and dribble under immense defensive pressure. And that's just the same with anything in life. Skills are rarely used in isolation. How many pure mathematicians do you know? Pure linguistic? They don't exist outside of research institutions. People who master one skill almost always expand into adjacent skills. Learning a new language leads to learning public speaking, writing, or even hosting events. Real-world mastery comes from the ability to mix and apply multiple skills together. This is what made Leonardo da Vinci a genius. Not just because he was a great painter, but because he combined art with science, anatomy, and engineering. Steve Jobs didn't revolutionize technology just because he understood coding. He blended design, business, and storytelling to make Apple what it is today. The people who make the biggest impact are the ones who connect skills across different fields. At the beginning of this video, I told you to label yourself to boost your confidence. But as you progress through your learning, you need to do the opposite, which is to tear those labels down. You're not just a pianist, you're a musician. I'm not just a management consultant, I'm a content creator helping people solve their problems. So don't just learn something new, become something new. Because in the end, learning isn't just about getting better at one thing, it's about becoming someone who can do anything. The truth is, learning never really ends. Every skill you master unlocks a door to another. Every challenge pushes you further, and like all the extraordinary people in the history, learning starts with just a set of time-tested principles which you just learned today. So the only question is, what would you master next? I'm Kai Z, and I will see you in the next one.